Welcome to story time. I'm going to tell you the story about the Reformation in England, which is on pages 372 to 373 in your book, and online is chapter 16, page 3. I'm going to have some help from Charles Dickens's History of England. So I was on tour in Washington, D.C. I don't remember what we were looking at or what brought it up, but I was probably thinking about something else when the tour guide suddenly had my full attention. I'm like, did he just say Henry VIII started the Protestant Reformation? Since then, I discovered that lots of people think this. He did live at the same time as Martin Luther and actually started the Protestant church in England, changed England to a Protestant country. But no, you know from the last lesson that it was started in Germany by Martin Luther. And actually, in fact, Henry was so uber Catholic that he wrote a book attacking Luther, allegedly with the help of his good friend Sir Thomas More. After which, the Pope declared Henry Defender of the Faith, a title English monarchs hold to this day. So what made this guy defect to the other side? The story has nothing to do with his faith in God. Your textbook reads, the English Reformation was rooted in politics. King Henry VIII wanted to divorce his wife, Catherine of Aragon, with whom he had a daughter, Mary. So we know it was politics, not religion. There is so much more to this story. Where have you heard Aragon before? Catherine of Aragon. Aragon, does that sound familiar? Catherine was the daughter of the powerful king and queen of Spain, Isabella of Castile, and Ferdinand of, you guessed it, Aragon. Yes, that Ferdinand and Isabella. This is why the Pope would not annul Henry's marriage to Catherine. He did not want to upset these powerful monarchs. But on what grounds was Henry asking to annul his marriage of 20 years, and why? You know how important it was for kings to have a male heir. Henry claimed that God had not blessed his marriage with a son because he sinned by marrying his brother's wife. Wait, what? What? Yes, Henry had an older brother, heir to the throne of England. A marriage was arranged for him and Catherine before his 3rd birthday. They were married when he was 15, and he died 6 months later. Their father, Henry VII, didn't want to lose the political alliance this marriage would have facilitated, so he made arrangements for Henry to marry her instead. This explains why Henry was so uber Catholic. Remember, younger brothers studied to serve in the church. They married just before Henry's 18th birthday. She was 23. They were married 20 years. They had one daughter, but no son. Only their daughter, Mary. One more factor in Henry's urgency to get the annulment is that his mistress, Anne Boleyn, was pregnant. Long story short, the Pope said no. Henry decided to use his royal prerogative and make himself the head of the church, and appointed the Archbishop of Canterbury, Thomas Cranmer, who promptly annulled his marriage to Catherine. Anne was made queen, otherwise the child that she was about to give birth to wouldn't have a claim to the throne. When Elizabeth was born, Henry was naturally disappointed that it wasn't a boy. Parliament passed the Act of Supremacy in 1534, which declared the king and not the Pope head of the church. Henry was accustomed to doing whatever he wanted. When he was growing up, he had a whipping boy. To take punishment whenever Henry was naughty. Seriously. His loyal subject and friend, Thomas More, took the bold stand of expressing that he didn't think this was right for Henry to be the head of the church. Henry was not accustomed to opposition. When he was doomed to death, when More came away from his trial with the edge of the executioner's axe turned towards him, the sign that he was doomed to death, he bore it quite serenely and gave his blessing to his son, who pressed through the crowd in Westminster Hall and kneeled down to receive it. But when he got to the Tower Wharf, his favorite daughter rushed through the guards to kiss him. He was overcome at last. Soon he recovered and showed courage. When he was going up the steps of the scaffold to his death, he said to the lieutenant of the Tower, "I pray you, Master Lieutenant, see me up safe, and for my coming down I can shift for myself." Also he said to the executioner, after he had laid his head upon the block, "Let me put my beard out of the way, for that at least has never committed any treason." Then his head was struck off at a blow. Sir Thomas More had been one of Henry's truest friends, but to be a friend of that fellow was almost as dangerous as to be his wife. Catherine remained in England, and to her dying day said she was and always would be Henry's wife. She was allowed private Catholic services, though England was now a Protestant country, and raised Mary Catholic as well. Henry continued his quest for a son by famously going through 6 wives. Anne was accused of all kinds of horrible things, found guilty, and beheaded. Henry's 3rd wife, Jane Seymour, produced a son, Edward, and then she died 12 days later. Henry VIII died in 1547, and Edward became king. He was only 9 years old, so a regency, which happened to be full of Protestant enthusiasts, ran the country. They made big changes in a short period of time, which history proves is never a good idea. Before he was old enough to become king in his own right, Edward died. Mary, who, as you recall, has been raised Catholic, was his successor to the throne. She quickly had Cranmer, the one who had annulled her mother's marriage to Henry, along with Edward's advisors, Latimer and Ridley, charged with treason and heresy and thrown into the Tower of London. She undid all the Protestant laws in an effort to turn back the clock to the time when England was a Catholic nation. Then she married Philip II of Spain, Charles V's son. Yes, that Charles V, Holy Roman Emperor, the guy that tried to stop Luther. He was 27 and she was 37. Unless the marriage resulted in a child, Philip would have no claim to the English throne. She believed her prayers for a son were not being answered because she wasn't doing enough to rid England of Protestantism. She began signing orders of execution, beginning with Cranmer. Punishment for heresy, burning at the stake. Ridley and Latimer were brought out to make another of the dreadful bonfires. On coming to the dreadful spot, they embraced each other. Ridley's brother-in-law was there with bags of gunpowder, and when they were both chained up, he tied them round their bodies. Then a light was thrown upon the pile to fire it. "Be of good comfort, Master Ridley," said Latimer at that awful moment, "and play the man. We shall this day light such a candle by God's grace in England as I trust shall never be put out." He died quickly by the fire, but the fire, having burned the legs of Ridley, sunk. There he lingered, chained to the iron post, and crying, "Oh, I cannot burn, I cannot burn," At last the gunpowder caught fire and ended his miseries. As for Cranmer, a plan was laid for inducing Cranmer to sign recantations. In spite of this, he also was taken to be burnt. He was asked to make a public confession of his faith before the people. He declared against his recantation and said that because his right hand had signed those papers, he would burn his right hand first. One of the directors of the execution called out to the men to make haste. When the fire was lighted, Cranmer stretched out his right hand and crying out, "This hand hath offended," held it among the flames until it blazed and burned away. In her roughly 5-year reign, Mary Tudor, Mary I of England, had around 300 of her own subjects burned alive. When she died, her half-sister Elizabeth came to the throne, and although she was a moderate, returned England to Protestant. The coronation was a great success, and on the next day, she was presented with a petition asking the new queen, since it was the custom to release some prisoners on such occasions, would she have the goodness to release the 4 evangelists, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, and also the apostle St. Paul, who had been for some time shut up in a strange language so that the people could not get at them. Get it? They're asking for the church services to be done in the vernacular again, so that everyone could understand them. There is much more to this story, so if you're interested, I suggest you read Dickens' History of England. All right, that and thank you for listening.